The dim yellow glow from the worn-out ceiling bulb reflected off the crumpled bills scattered across the scratched wooden table by the kitchen, where Nathan Miller sat motionless for hours, eyes glazed over, watching the cold numbers dance as fatigue pulsed through his veins. It had been months since his last quiet evening, free from the crushing need to count every dollar for hospital fees, medication, specialized food for his son, or rent. And with each envelope he opened, the fear inside him grew, fear that one day he wouldn't be able to carry it all anymore, that he might lose the most precious thing in his life, Liam, the boy he loved more than life itself. Liam was only 4, yet his small body bore limits that even grown adults would struggle to endure. After a severe fever at age 2, Liam had been left quadriplegic with delayed neurological development. He couldn't sit, speak, eat by himself, or move on his own. He lived in a world apart, one where life happened around him, but never included him. A world he observed silently through his large, round brown eyes, sometimes wide with confusion, sometimes deep with sorrow. Those eyes, those were what kept Nathan going. Every time he looked into them, he saw a soul that longed to live, to be loved, and to be connected. Each day, Nathan juggled his part-time job at a small finance firm while also being everything his son needed at home. The nurse changing Liam's diapers, the cook preparing doctor-prescribed meals, the physical therapist repositioning Liam every few hours to prevent bed sores, the father singing lullabies in a tired, hoarse voice each night, even as he was about to collapse. Mornings began at 4:30 with the alarm clock, and nights ended with the soft, fragile sound of Liam's monitored breathing. As for the part of him still called Nathan, it had quietly dissolved into layers of exhaustion, duty, and a loneliness too vast for words. Their small Newark apartment was barely 50 square meters, yet it brimmed with unspoken worries. Beyond the thin wall were the weekend parties, the carefree laughter of neighbors, the regular sounds of lives Nathan no longer felt part of. On the other side of the door, people were living. In here, he was only surviving, one day at a time, praying his son wouldn't have to endure more pain. Every night, once everything was cleaned and the old sofa folded down into a bed, Nathan would sit by Liam's crib for a long while. He'd rest his hand on his son's tiny, cold fingers, press his cheek to the fragile skin, as if drawing strength from its delicate warmth. Some nights, his tears would fall without him even noticing, triggered by the soft whimper when Liam startled in his sleep, or the subtle, slowed blink that made Nathan's heart skip in quiet panic. In the gray weight of despair, a thought would sometimes flicker, like a whisper asking, could something or someone make Liam feel less alone? A friend, perhaps? A creature patient enough to be by his son's side when he could not? But Nathan would always shake the idea away like a foolish dream. He had nothing left to give, certainly not to another living soul. And yet, miracles often arrive dressed in the humblest forms. Just when Nathan was nearing collapse, a small flicker, what he would later call a gift of fate, quietly knocked on the door to his heart with one simple thought. Could a dog change his son's entire world? It was on a cold night, winter brushing gently at the city's edge, when the streets had fallen into slumber and only the ticking clock echoed in the quiet apartment, that Nathan Miller sat silently by the window. His hands were wrapped around a mug of cold coffee, brewed at some forgotten hour. His eyes followed the thin mist veiling the glass, where the streetlight cast faint shadows on the empty sidewalk below, like faded memories flickering at the edge of recall. Behind him, Liam slept. The soft hum of the monitor tracking his breathing made the silence feel just a little more bearable. For months, Nathan had moved through life like a shadow, up before dawn, navigating Liam's every meal, ferrying him to therapy, and scrambling through part-time work to keep up with the unrelenting tide of bills. Nights were for diaper changes, adjusting the room temperature, monitoring each breath, each sound, each twitch that might mean something was wrong. He grew used to cold meals, dozing off on the couch, and never daring to imagine a better tomorrow. His world had narrowed to one sacred mission: keeping Liam safe, even if it meant giving up the rest of himself. But that night, with body and soul utterly worn, he found himself thinking about a dog. The thought came gently, like a wisp of smoke sneaking through the cracks of his reality. And then it stayed, quiet but powerful enough that Nathan whispered aloud, afraid to break its fragile holiness. I wonder, is there a dog out there patient and gentle enough to be Liam's friend? At first, he felt guilty for even entertaining the idea. How could he think about bringing in another life when he barely managed to care for his son? A dog meant responsibility, cost, barking that might annoy the neighbors, cold walks in the snow, things Nathan wasn't sure he had strength left for. But then he thought of Liam's eyes, those unblinking, still eyes that watched the room's movements without reaction, without joy, never knowing the warmth of a touch, a hug, or simply the presence of someone else. A dog, Nathan thought, wouldn't need Liam to speak or smile or respond. It would just need to be there. All Liam would need to feel is that something alive, warm, and unyielding had chosen to stay by his side. But life had never been simple for them. Linda Cartwright, the downstairs neighbor, had banged her ceiling with a broom every time Liam cried at night. She had yelled to the property manager more than once that a child like that shouldn't live in a regular building. She hated noise, hated disruption, and most of all, hated animals. The mere thought of bringing home a dog summoned images of complaints, tense meetings, and, worst of all, the threat of eviction from the only place Nathan and Liam could call home. Yet somehow, that very opposition from the world made the longing more real. Nathan didn't want Liam to grow up in silence and fear. He didn't want his son to know only machines, medicine, and isolation. A dog might not work miracles, but it could bring warmth to the long, soundless days. A soft paw step, an unexpected lick, or simply a quiet body curled beside his boy, refusing to leave. That night, after setting down his mug, Nathan walked to Liam's crib. He leaned over and placed his hand gently on his son's chest, where a tiny heart continued to beat with unwavering grace. "I'll find you a friend," he whispered, a promise spoken from the deepest part of his soul. "Not to heal you, but so you don't have to walk this road alone." And when he turned off the lights and made his way to the old sofa, something inside him shifted. It wasn't yet hope, not quite resolved, just the faintest flicker, like the first light breaking through a long night. Small, fragile, but enough to begin a new journey, one that would change both their lives in ways Nathan could not yet imagine. The next morning, as pale winter sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, Nathan woke to a strange but comforting sensation. A faint pulse of energy he hadn't felt in a long time. His eyes were still heavy from lack of sleep. His shoulders ached from another night curled on the aging sofa. But deep within him, something stirred, like an underground spring that had finally found a crack in the rock to seep toward the light. After preparing breakfast for Liam and leaving him with their usual caregiver, Nathan pulled on a threadbare sweater and stepped out of the apartment with one clear goal in mind: to find the nearest animal rescue center. The road to the shelter wound behind an old industrial complex, where the biting cold reminded him that reality was still sharp and unforgiving. Inside, fluorescent lights cast a sterile glow over the long rows of metal kennels, echoing with barking, whimpering, and the scratch of paws on concrete. Each dog here carried a story, a past marked by neglect or pain, like lost souls waiting for a small miracle, a second chance. Nathan moved slowly past each cage, pausing to meet their eyes. Some were eager, some fearful, and some had already given up, no longer asking to be saved. He wasn't expecting anything grand, only hoping to feel a flicker of connection, a spark of trust from someone in this place of hurt. Then, at the far end of the row, just as hope began to fade, A still figure stopped him in his tracks. The German Shepherd didn't bark, didn't leap or cry like the others. It simply sat, quiet, noble but not proud, with its ears alert and deep brown eyes fixed on Nathan as if it had been waiting all along. Max read the small metal tag on the kennel gate, and somehow the name whispered its way into Nathan's thoughts, like a truth he hadn't known he was seeking. In that moment, something unspoken passed between them, a silent thread of recognition that bypassed words entirely. A middle-aged woman in a staff uniform approached and quietly opened the cage. His name's Max, abandoned by his owner because of a back leg injury. He broke a bone as a pup, but they didn't want to pay for the surgery, so they left him here. We operated, and he healed well enough, but no one's wanted him since. Too much trouble, they say. Max stepped out with a slight limp, but every movement was careful, composed, as if he knew his steps must carry humility through a world that had not been kind. He didn't jump or lick Nathan's hand like the others. Instead, he walked slowly, stopped right in front of him, and lifted his head. In those eyes was a universe of abandonment, of patience, of waiting. Nathan knelt, placed his hand gently on Max's head, and in that quiet, inexplicable instant, he knew. This wasn't just a dog. This was a missing piece of Liam's world. Just as the adoption paperwork was nearly complete, Nathan's phone rang. It was Linda Cartwright. Her shrill voice carried no pretense of civility. "I hear you're thinking of bringing a dog home? This building isn't for people with pets, especially not big, damaged ones like that. If you go through with this, I'll file a formal complaint with management." The familiar threat landed like a dull blade. Not sharp enough to end things, but sharp enough to make giving up seem easier. Nathan looked down at Max, who now sat quietly at his feet, head slightly tilted, tail gently thumping the ground. There was no pleading in his eyes, no urgency, just a calm, unwavering presence. And in that silence, Nathan found his answer. He signed the adoption form, despite the warnings, despite the resistance he knew was waiting at home. Because when a soul that's been abandoned looks at you like you're everything, it's not something the world gets to take away. That day, amidst the chaos of barking and the bite of late winter wind, Nathan walked Max out of the shelter. A thin, weary man carrying more pain than he let show, and a limping dog marked by scars not yet faded. But in both their eyes, for the first time, something like hope began to glow. That afternoon, as Nathan drove Max home in the beat-up car that had stalled too many times on too many cold roads, he still carried the warmth of the dog's gaze from the shelter, eyes that seemed to know exactly what he needed without saying a word. But the moment the creaky elevator reached the third floor and the apartment door swung open, everything went sideways. Max didn't ease into his new space with the caution Nathan had imagined. Instead, he exploded into it, bursting with the kind of energy that only months of confinement could store up. He bounced from room to room, barking joyfully, spinning around the tiny dining table, leaping onto the sofa where Nathan usually slept, and tearing the neatly folded blanket into chaos, climbing Liam's rocker and racing into the kitchen, sending the water bowl flying across the hardwood floor. In under 5 minutes, the apartment, once suffocating in its silence, was filled with noise, motion, and a kind of unruly joy Nathan had forgotten existed. And all he could do was stand in the doorway, leash still in hand, heart sinking with every joyous step he somehow couldn't bring himself to celebrate. In the corner, Liam remained still in his support chair by the window, the afternoon light falling across his face. He didn't blink, didn't turn, didn't react to the whirlwind that was Max. His large brown eyes stared straight ahead into the invisible place where the outside world could not reach him. Nathan walked over, touched his son's small, cold hand, then turned to Max, now barking excitedly at his reflection in the mirror, and doubt crept in. What had he been hoping for? That bringing a dog home would magically change everything? That a 4-legged creature, itself abandoned and broken, could instantly ease the silence of his son's unreachable world? Liam didn't respond. He didn't look, didn't flinch, didn't cry or smile. Max, for all his energy, hadn't moved the needle in Liam's expression even once. And Nathan, just then, felt like he'd written a fairy tale for himself only to fall asleep halfway through. Worse, not 30 minutes after Max arrived, 3 loud knocks thudded through the floor from below. Linda Cartwright, whose radar for disruption seemed surgically wired to the hardwood. A cold message popped up on Nathan's phone minutes later. "I've reported this to management. If I hear another sound, I'll be filing for a review of your ability to care for that child. If you can't control a dog, how can you control the safety of a paralyzed boy?" Nathan's hand clenched so tightly his knuckles turned white. He didn't know what stung more, the cruelty of the words, or the fact that maybe she wasn't entirely wrong. Maybe, to the outside world, he did look like a man failing. Exhausted, worn thin, raising a child who couldn't speak or move, and now bringing home a dog no one wanted, one with a limp, and an energy he couldn't seem to contain. He looked around the room, scattered blankets, tilted chairs, spilled water, and wondered if he'd just thrown Liam's fragile world into another layer of chaos. He stepped to the window, opened it, and breathed in the cold air of the late afternoon, his chest full of tangled feelings, hope, guilt, regret. Maybe he'd made a mistake. Maybe he'd placed his faith in something that didn't exist. And then, as if sensing the shift in the room, Max suddenly stopped. No more barking, no more jumping. He walked slowly toward Liam, not with excitement now, but with something gentler, more deliberate. Step by step, Max approached the boy, who hadn't moved an inch. He lowered his body, gently sniffed the small foot beneath the blanket. No sound, no reaction. But Max didn't leave. He stood there, still as a guard, tail lowered, head tilted, listening for something only he could hear. Nathan slid to the floor, back against the wall, eyes fixed on the scene before him. A dog once abandoned, and a boy locked in silence. No one spoke. No smiles were exchanged. No miracle happened. But something subtle entered that room. Something fragile, unnamed. Something just strong enough to hold on to before faith slipped too far away. And as the sky darkened and lights blinked on one by one in the apartment, Nathan whispered into the quiet, like a prayer meant only for the night. If something is beginning, please, let it grow. In the stillness of the night, with the sound of rain whispering steadily against the window, Nathan and Liam's tiny apartment seemed quieter than ever before. Max lay curled up in the corner, breathing evenly, though his ears remained perked, alert to every shift in the room. Nathan sat motionless in the rocking chair beside Liam's crib, head in hands, shoulders slumped from exhaustion, his heart still weighed down by the chaos and doubt of the afternoon. He hadn't expected a miracle, but he had hoped that Max might trigger something in Liam, even the smallest flicker. A glance, a twitch of the lips, a fleeting moment of attention. But all day and into the night, Liam had remained the same. Silent, distant, untouched by the world that buzzed around him. And Max, in all his wild energy, had been far more than Nathan imagined. Too restless, too much. Coupled with the threats from Mrs. Cartwright, each like a dull knife to the chest, Nathan had begun to wonder if he'd made things worse instead of better. But then, everything stopped the moment he heard it. A faint whimper, as thin as a thread, coming from the crib. He shot up, rushing to Liam's side. The boy's face was pinched in discomfort, his small body drawn in tightly. Nathan recognized that sound. It was the silent cry of pain, something that had become achingly familiar over the years. It might have been a cramp, or a limb gone numb after hours of stillness, or just one of the countless unnamed discomforts Liam endured in silence. Normally, Nathan would gently reposition him, offer a warm compress, and murmur soft words of comfort. And eventually, the quiet would return, as if nothing had happened. But this time, before he could move, Max stirred. He didn't bark, didn't rush. Guided by pure instinct, Max rose and walked toward the crib. Slowly, deliberately, as if afraid to shatter something sacred. Nathan froze, unsure whether to intervene or just watch, sensing that what was about to happen was unlike anything before. Max stood beside the crib, staring at Liam for a few silent seconds. Then, with a gentleness no one would expect from a large German shepherd, he lowered his head and touched his wet nose to Liam's small, motionless hand beneath the blanket. And then, softly, he licked the tip of Liam's finger. And that's when the miracle happened. Liam, who for so long had been as still as a statue, trembled, just slightly, a near invisible twitch in his hand. But it was real. Nathan stopped breathing, his heart pounding, eyes wide in disbelief. That hand, the one so long disconnected from life, had moved, as if answering a call no one else could hear. Max stopped after that single lick. He didn't press, didn't beg for more. He simply remained there, head bowed, eyes on Liam with a calm, steady warmth, a silent vow of companionship that asked for nothing in return. At that moment, Nathan finally saw it. Max wasn't just listening, he understood. Nathan dropped to his knees, eyes fixed on Liam's tiny fingers. He thought of the endless hours of therapy, the structured routines from certified specialists, the sterile rooms and machines that had never drawn even the smallest reaction. But here, on a rainy night, without doctors or diagnoses, an abandoned dog, a motionless child, and a touch softer than breath had begun to move what everyone else thought was unreachable. A tear slipped down Nathan's cheek, and he let it fall. He lowered his head, whispering words so quiet they were almost a prayer. "Thank you, Max." And Max, as if he had done what he came to do, returned quietly to his corner, curled up again, but never took his eyes off Liam. His tail gave one soft thump, a silent message that said, "You're not alone. I'm here." In that strange, sacred stillness, Nathan sat beside his son, tears in his eyes but light in his gaze for the first time in years. Because now, he didn't just see a dog. He saw a chance, a connection, a spark of light in the heart he'd feared had turned to stone. The next morning, as soft sunlight filtered through the curtains, Nathan woke with a feeling he hadn't known in months. It wasn't the weight of exhaustion or the usual dread over medical bills. It was something lighter, fragile but alive. Hope, and just enough of it to want to try again. Max was still lying beside Liam's crib, head resting gently on the floor, eyes half closed, ears twitching with every subtle movement. Liam, though still silent, no longer wore the tense grimace he often had when in pain. His lips looked softer, his face calmer. Nathan smiled for the first time in days and moved quietly to the kitchen. He was just about to pour a cup of coffee when 3 sharp knocks echoed up from the floorboards, familiar, firm, and full of warning. Mrs. Linda Cartwright. Soon after, Nathan's phone vibrated with a message. No exclamation marks, but every word carried a cold authority. "I heard barking, 6:47 a.m. If you don't do something, I'll inform management." Nathan sighed, looking down to where Max now sat, chewing a rubber toy in silence. Maybe he'd barked softly while shifting in his sleep. Or maybe Mrs. Cartwright, whose hearing seemed fine-tuned for judgment, had simply decided that Max's existence was enough reason to continue her crusade. He knew her resentment wasn't new. Ever since Liam was a baby, every time he cried in the night, her broom would thud against the ceiling, followed by complaints to neighbors about, "What kind of man thinks he can raise a child alone?" Nathan had never responded, not because he was weak, but because he had no strength to spare. Every ounce had gone into keeping his son alive. But today felt different. After what he'd witnessed the night before, the soft lick, the tiny movement, the shift that even doctors couldn't summon, Nathan felt something stir in his chest, not anger, something deeper, protective, grateful, for a creature so many deemed unfit for children. That afternoon, Mrs. Cartwright came to the door. She stood at the threshold of apartment 3B, in a gray wool coat, an old pearl bracelet at her wrist, leaning on her cane like her frailty justified the sharpness of her words. She didn't knock. She tapped her cane 3 times, blunt and clear, then spoke before Nathan could open the door. "Big dogs don't belong in buildings like this, especially not around children like yours. You should think twice before someone gets hurt." Nathan opened the door. He didn't speak. Max appeared beside him, quiet and calm. No bark, no growl. He stood tall, shoulders squared, head lifted. His eyes met Mrs. Cartwright's, not with defiance, but with something that might have been understanding. She paused. Her gaze flicked down to Max's slight limp, and she curled her lip as if finding proof for her argument. "He's injured, big. One wrong move, and your son's chair could flip." Her words struck like ice, sharp and presumptive. She had never asked about Liam, never wondered what it cost to keep him alive. And now she stood here, a witness for the world's verdict against those like Nathan, those without money, power, or perfection, who dared to want better for their children. "I understand your concerns," Nathan said, his voice low, steady, calmer than he expected. "But Max isn't a danger. He's the best thing that's ever happened to my son. And I won't send him away over a bark." Mrs. Cartwright didn't reply. She stared at him, long and hard. For a moment, something softened in her eyes. Just a flicker, like a faded memory briefly resurfacing. Then it vanished. She turned, cane tapping rhythmically down the hall, disappearing into shadow. Nathan closed the door behind her and stood in silence, his hand resting on Max's head. The dog looked up at him with warm, quiet eyes. No words were needed. That look said everything. "I'm here." And Nathan, though still surrounded by threats and uncertainty, realized something with striking clarity. He wasn't alone anymore. No matter how loud her cane banged the floor, no matter how the world tried to shrink or shame what it didn't understand, in this small apartment, between a silent child and a dog once discarded, something was taking root, quietly, steadily, like light slipping through the crack in a cold, forgotten wall. The door had just closed behind Mrs. Linda Cartwright, and in the silence that followed their tense exchange, Nathan remained still, his hand resting on Max's head, seeking reassurance that he'd made the right choice. Despite the judgment and skepticism, Max's presence in this tiny apartment was exactly what he and Liam needed. Max seemed to understand. He gently nudged his head into Nathan's palm, then quietly turned toward Liam, who was still nestled in his support chair by the window, the soft light of late afternoon casting a warm halo around his fine, wispy hair. Nathan sat down on the floor, leaning against the table leg, watching as Max trotted toward the toy basket, a small collection of Liam's favorite items that had never once sparked a reaction. After a few seconds of contemplation, Max gently picked up a gray stuffed bunny with long ears and a faded blue ribbon, worn from years of stillness. He padded softly to Liam, set the toy beside his unmoving hand, and then watched. No barking, no impatience. Just a dog offering a gift, simple, earnest, and full of quiet devotion. And then, something extraordinary happened. At first, Nathan thought his eyes were playing tricks. He blinked, then blinked again. But it wasn't his imagination. Liam's wide brown eyes, usually fixed in a blank, distant stare, moved. Slowly, they shifted toward where Max stood, and then they settled on the bunny, resting beside his hand. He didn't blink, didn't turn his head, but there was no doubt. Liam was following Max, with purpose, with intent, as if, for the very first time, something within him had reached beyond his own body to connect with the outside world. Nathan couldn't believe it. A wave of emotion crashed through his chest, breaking the dam of doubt and weariness that had held him hostage for so long. His hand flew to his mouth, shoulders trembled as silent tears streamed down his face. Not tears of sorrow, but of a joy so overwhelming, so long forgotten, he hadn't dared to imagine it could return. He had seen so many doctors shake their heads. So many therapists sigh with disappointment when Liam doesn't respond to light, to sound, to touch. And yet here, in a quiet living room, without machines or expensive methods, stood a limping rescue dog, a threadbare stuffed bunny, and a boy who had never answered to the world. And between them, something fragile had formed. A thread no thicker than spider silk, but strong enough to pull Nathan's heart out of the abyss. Max didn't move. His ears stood tall, tail wagging slowly, as he took a half step back. Respectful, as if to give the moment room to breathe. Nathan knelt beside his son, wiping his tears with the back of his hand, gently holding the small hand that had just moved, whispering through shaky breath, "You saw Max, didn't you? You saw him, Liam, didn't you?" No reply came. No grip, no spoken sound. But Liam's gaze remained locked on Max. And in that gaze, Nathan saw life. Not just in the biological sense, but something deeper. The soul of a child quietly reaching toward the world, even if it was just one small, uncertain step. That afternoon, apartment 3B no longer felt like a cramped, suffocating space. It had become a place where a father saw his child touch life for the first time. And the one who helped him do it wasn't a famous doctor or a pricey therapy program. It was Max, the dog the world had dismissed as broken, now the bearer of Liam's first miracle. From that day on, when Liam first turned his eyes to follow Max, marking the start of something sacred, the rhythm inside apartment 3B began to shift. Quietly, without ceremony, like spring slipping into the cracks left behind by winter. Max was no longer the newcomer adjusting to a strange space. He became part of the room itself, as essential as breath, as steady as a heartbeat easing the loneliness of each morning. That very night, Nathan prepared a soft, cozy bed in the corner near his own. Blanket, water bowl, toys, everything carefully arranged as advised in the First-Time Dog Owner Guide. Max stood before it, observed for a few seconds, and then calmly turned away. He walked over to Liam's crib and laid down just beneath it, exactly where, the night before, he had made his gentle, healing touch. Nathan called to him softly, patting the new bed, encouraging him to come rest. Max lifted his head, glanced back with an expression that said, "I'm fine, but he needs me more." And so it became routine. Every night, Max lay beside Liam's crib, never straying, never complaining, never truly asleep. Nathan tried moving the bed closer, coaxed him back, even carried him once or twice. But Max always returned to his post like a sentry on duty. His deep brown eyes stayed half-lidded, ears alert to the softest beep from the breathing monitor or the faintest whimper when Liam shifted in discomfort. There were no commands, no training, just devotion, growing stronger with every night, as if Max had pledged his rest in exchange for peace, for a boy he had silently chosen as his own. Nathan watched it all in quiet awe, storing each moment like a treasure too sacred to disturb. There had been nights when the apartment felt colder than the wind outside, when even the ticking of the clock cut into silence like knives. Nights when Nathan sat curled in the kitchen, light flickering across his sunken face, afraid that if he let the tears fall, he would fall apart entirely. But since Max had arrived, the apartment had begun to warm, not in temperature, but in soul. A gentle, living warmth radiated from this creature once labeled damaged, now bringing life back into a place that had nearly given up. As for Liam, though he still could not speak or move much, something in his expression had changed. The tension in his sleeping face had eased. His lips no longer pressed tightly together in pain. Sometimes, in the stillness of night, he tilted his head ever so slightly toward Max's presence, as if, even in sleep, he needed to feel the dog's warmth nearby. Occasionally, in the dim haze of early morning, Nathan would wake before his alarm. He'd open his eyes to find Max lifting his head from his paws, still watching over Liam, his gaze never straying, as though he had guarded that child's sleep all night with his entire being. In those moments, all the weight of single fatherhood, the crushing bills, the unstable work, and the judgment from downstairs, all of it vanished in the strange, silent holiness of that bond. Nathan knew then, even though life would remain hard, he wasn't fighting alone anymore. And in that little apartment, beneath the ceiling where Mrs. Cartwright's cane still occasionally echoed like a warning bell from the world outside, Max, the dog once deemed too broken to matter, was doing what no one else could. He was helping a silent child rediscover the warmth of life, simply by being there, completely, faithfully, without ever asking for anything in return. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm, gentle, steady, and filled with warmth, as if Max's breathing had synchronized with the pulse of the home, grounding everything in a quiet kind of hope. Every morning, Nathan woke to find Max still guarding Liam's sleep, and every evening he closed the door behind him after a long day without the loneliness that once haunted him. But peace is rarely permanent, and on one stormy night, when the sky seemed to unleash all its fury upon rooftops long used to silence, a crisis struck, threatening to shatter everything they had only just begun to build. That night, the wind howled violently, rattling the windows, rain sneaking in through a window Nathan had forgotten to latch. He was exhausted after a long shift at the accounting job he had just picked up, and had barely collapsed onto the sofa when sleep claimed him. The room was dim, lit only by the faint glow of the night lamp beside Liam's crib. Max lay nearby, head resting on his paws, eyes half closed but ears twitching constantly, attuned to the storm and the subtle hum of Liam's breathing machine. Then, suddenly, through the downpour and gusting winds, Max shot up. His ears pricked, eyes wide, his entire body tense like a drawn bow. He rushed to Liam's crib, sniffed frantically, then began to whimper in a panic before bolting to Nathan, pushing his snout into his shoulder, scratching at his arm, barking sharply and repeatedly, not playful barks, but something urgent, cutting through the night like a blade. Nathan jolted awake, heart pounding, as Max ran back to Liam's side, barking desperately, begging him to come. He raced over, and his heart nearly stopped. Liam was gasping for air, his chest heaving in ragged waves, lips beginning to take on a faint bluish hue. His eyes, usually calm and still, were now wide and vacant, caught in a silent panic. Nathan fumbled to check the machine, but the numbers were a mess. Nothing made sense. He grabbed his phone, his hands trembling as he dialed 911, his voice cracking as he described his son's state. All the while, Max remained at Liam's side, growling softly, clawing the floor in restless urgency, eyes never leaving the boy. 11 minutes later, the wail of the ambulance cut through the storm. EMTs burst through the door with a stretcher, monitors, and oxygen tanks. As they worked at lightning speed, Nathan stood frozen, shaking, eyes red with fear. Max refused to budge, staying pressed to Liam until one nurse, sensing the bond, nodded and allowed him to ride along. On the ride to the hospital, Nathan clutched Liam's tiny hand while Max rested his head on the stretcher, eyes so mournful that even the driver fell silent. In the ER, after a blur of urgent interventions, a doctor finally emerged, mask lowered, voice low but warm. If he'd arrived even a few minutes later, his lungs might have shut down completely. It happened during deep sleep, an abnormal spasm. Whoever caught it saved his life. Nathan turned to Max, sitting quietly in the corner, fur soaked from the rain, eyes fixed on the room where Liam was being stabilized. He walked over, knelt, and wrapped his arms around the dog's neck. For the first time in his life, holding someone with gratitude too deep for words. That night, as the fluorescent lights of the hospital corridor buzzed softly and the rain eased outside, Nathan sat silently by his son's bed. One hand rested on Liam's small fingers, the other on Max's back, still lying curled at the foot of the bed, steadfast. The storm outside had passed, but the greater storm inside Nathan, the fear of losing his child, had only just begun to settle. soothed by one perfectly timed bark from a wordless friend. From that night on, no one in apartment 3B thought of Max as just a dog. He had become a life-saving hero, a loyal night watchman, and more than anything, a bridge between Liam's fragile life and the world that threatened to sweep it away without warning. After that fateful stormy night, when Max, through frantic barking and eyes full of urgency, had pulled Liam back from death's cold edge, Nathan no longer saw Max as just a dog, or even as a beloved pet. He saw him as a true companion, a guardian angel with fur and 4 legs, living and breathing in the very apartment where miracles once seemed impossible. He began paying closer attention to Max's every move, every subtle behavior. Because by now, Nathan understood. Max didn't bark without reason. He didn't pace out of boredom. And he never stirred for anything trivial. Real miracles don't arrive in blinding light or dramatic fanfare. They come in the quiet gaze of a dog sitting beside a crib for hours. In the way Max gently licked Liam's hand when his breath grew shallow. In the soft, near whimper that sounded like intuition itself. An instinct so deep no machine could replicate it. At first, these signs confused Nathan. Once, Max let out a low, almost inaudible growl. Not out of anger, but as if sensing a shift. He circled the crib, lowered his head, and arched his back as though guarding Liam from an unseen threat. Nathan dismissed it as odd canine behavior, perhaps a weather-related sensitivity. But less than 2 hours later, Liam spiked a low-grade fever. Not severe, but enough to send chills through Nathan, reminding him of that stormy night. From then on, he began recording every one of Max's alerts, and soon a startling pattern emerged. Every time Max acted strangely, Liam would show signs of distress shortly afterward. Fevers, bloating, vomiting, limb stiffness, or simply unexplained restlessness. No one had taught Max to do this. No training, no command. He simply knew, bound by some unseen thread that connected 2 beings once labeled damaged. Max could sense something, chemical changes, heart rhythms, or something only a dog with pure instinct and unwavering love could detect. Once, while Nathan was doing laundry, Max appeared at the bathroom door, panicked, whining softly like a sob. Nathan ran to find Liam choking on phlegm, face flushed, arms flailing. He suctioned Liam's throat, adjusted the respirator, and held him close, eyes wet with fear at what might have happened if Max hadn't come. There were no witnesses, no doctors, no monitors are fast enough. Only Max, who shattered the silence to save a fragile life. Since then, Nathan has assigned Max an irreplaceable role. He kept a detailed journal of Max's signals, time, behavior, outcomes. One day, Max simply lay motionless by the crib, resting his head on Liam's arm. That evening, a doctor diagnosed the early stages of a urinary infection, so subtle no one had noticed. Another time, Max refused food, hovering by Liam's side. Hours later, Liam suffered a seizure so intense his lips turned blue. Again and again, Max proved more reliable than any machine. Of course, Mrs. Cartwright downstairs was not pleased. Complaints continued. Barking at odd hours, late-night movement, and, "Is this untrained animal even safe near a disabled child?" But this time, Nathan didn't back down. He sent a letter to building management, attaching hospital documentation, including a physician's note on canine alert behavior in pediatric care, and a single closing line written in a trembling but resolute hand. "If not for Max, my son wouldn't be alive today." Through every conflict, every sleepless night, Max remained, a constant presence. Quiet as the dark, warm as the sun, loyal as fate. Liam, though still unable to speak or call Max by name, looked at him with eyes that glowed in a way they never had before. A look that said, "I know you're with me, I feel it." And every morning, Nathan would place his hand on Max's head, then lean down and kiss his son's forehead, whispering a silent thank you. For in a world full of loss and quiet grief, he had found something truly extraordinary, a friendship that needed no words but was powerful enough to save a life. After endless days of gray rain dragging across the windows, the sun finally broke through on a cool early autumn morning, casting a soft golden light into the third-floor apartment where Max slept beside Liam's crib, his head resting on the wooden rail, ears twitching gently with the rhythm of the boy's breath. Nathan, exhausted from weeks caught between work and caring for his son, decided to take them both outside. Not for a doctor's visit, not for therapy, but for something they hadn't had in months. A simple walk in the park. He packed carefully, medication, warm towels, milk bottles, and around Max's neck he tied a small handkerchief embroidered with the word guardian, a silent acknowledgement of the sacred role the dog now played in their little family. The park was quiet in the morning. A few elderly people were practicing Tai Chi. Some children ran beneath kites, and the breeze rustled trees just beginning to change color. Nathan pushed Liam's wheelchair slowly along the gravel path, and Max walked faithfully beside it. No leash, no commands, never once straying from the wheel, as if he too was savoring the rare peace. Liam's face showed little expression, but his eyes were brighter than usual. He watched the falling leaves, the rays of light filtering through the canopy, and most intently, Max, the companion who never left his side. Everything felt perfect, until a sudden bicycle bell rang out behind them, loud and urgent, slicing through the calm. Nathan barely had time to turn before a boy, around 12 years old, wide-eyed, handlebars shaking, came speeding down the hill with no way to stop. The narrow path offered no room to swerve, and directly ahead sat Liam, motionless in his small chair, unable to react. Nathan screamed, instinctively reaching for the handles to pull the wheelchair aside. But before he could move, Max bolted. Without a word, without a cue, Max lunged forward like a streak of lightning, throwing himself in front of the oncoming bicycle. The impact struck not Liam, but Max. Metal clanged violently. The bike skidded, crashed to the ground, and Max was thrown across the grass, sliding into a heap with a faint red smear trailing from his left shoulder, where metal had torn skin. Everything froze. Liam sat still, face slightly tilted toward Max, eyes wide and unmoving. Nathan rushed to him, heart in his throat, watching as Max struggled to his feet, limping but alert, eyes locked on Liam, not crying out in pain, not fleeing, but simply needing to see that the boy was unharmed. The cyclist had fallen and was crying in panic. Onlookers, stunned, began to gather. A woman offered a cloth. A man called the nearest vet. And a young woman knelt beside Max, her hands trembling as she whispered, "I've never seen a dog do something like that, never." Nathan gathered Max into his arms, tears spilling freely, soaking into the dog's bloodied fur. He could barely speak, only repeating through gasps, "Thank you. Thank you for saving my son, Max." And as Max's blood stained the handkerchief marked "Guardian," the crowd fell silent. Some wiped their eyes. Others knelt to gently touch his back, no longer seeing just a dog, but a hero, one without helmet or armor, who had leapt into danger to protect a life that couldn't protect itself. At the nearby vet clinic, Max's wound was stitched, a deep gash but not life-threatening. As the vet worked, Nathan held Max's paw tightly. Liam, silent as ever, watched every movement, his lips twitching faintly as though trying to form a sound. A nurse gently dabbed at the blood and murmured, "I've never seen a dog do this for a child, let alone for one he's chosen as his every day." That evening, back in their familiar apartment, Max lay on the rug beside Liam's crib, bandaged but calm. Nathan sat on the floor, one hand resting on his son's shoulder, the other stroking Max's warm fur. The apartment was still small, still plain, and the knocks from below still came. But everything felt lighter now, because today Max had reminded them all of something profound, that love needs no language, no promises, just courage, and the willingness to hurt for the ones we love. The wound from the park healed quickly, but every time Nathan saw Max's new limp, A pang tightened in his chest, like a haunting melody, both beautiful and unbearably sad. Since the accident, Liam had also begun to change. His eyes followed Max more frequently, his fingers sometimes curled when Max drew near, and his lips, quiet for years, had begun to move more often, as if waiting for a voice that had yet to find its way out. They had begun to believe in a different future, one where Liam could connect, one where Max would always be beside him, but life rarely lets peace linger for long. And then, just like that, Max disappeared. It was a quiet Saturday night. Nathan, exhausted from a long day juggling paperwork and caregiving, had forgotten to lock the back door that led to the shared hallway. Max, as always, lay beside Liam's crib. No one knew when he left. Maybe a distant noise had drawn him, or a strange scent triggered his instincts. But by morning, when Nathan called out and Max didn't appear, a cold dread clenched his chest like a steel trap. Max, their guardian, their quiet hero, was gone. The search began immediately, driven by a panic Nathan hadn't felt since the night Liam had nearly died. He printed flyers all morning, plastered them around the neighborhood, visited every shop, asked every passerby, from Carl's corner store to the security booth at the end of the street. But no one had seen him. Liam, sitting in his wheelchair, didn't speak, didn't cry, but his eyes never left the front door, as if his spirit had already gone searching, long before Nathan could take his first step outside. That night, Nathan slumped at the door, sleep-deprived and hollow, Liam dozing beside him with the old stuffed bunny Max had always carried. The apartment, once warmed by Max's presence, now felt cold again, like the early days of fear and helplessness. 2 days passed. Rain began to fall, light but steady. Hope faded under the weight of silence. Dark thoughts crept in, cars, strays, cruel strangers, each worse than the last. But just as Nathan felt the last thread of faith begin to fray, at dusk on the second day, a soft scratching echoed from the other side of the door. He flung it open without thinking, and there Max stood. Matted with mud, blood trickling down his front right leg, his shoulder scraped raw, trembling with cold. But those eyes still held warmth. No anger, no fear, just one message. I found my way back. I'm alive, and I came home. Nathan collapsed to his knees, wrapping Max in his arms as if letting go would cause the dog to vanish once more into the night. Max whimpered softly, exhausted, resting his head against Nathan's chest. And behind them, in his wheelchair, Liam let out a faint sound, barely more than a breath, like wind brushing the ear, but just enough to make Nathan turn. And then he saw it. Liam was trying to lift his hand. His index finger moved slowly toward Max, while his lips pressed together in a strained attempt to form a sound. Nathan held his breath. There they were, the two beings he loved most, one fighting to stay alive, the other fighting to speak. And between them stretched a bond stronger than any definition of family the world could offer. That night, after tending to Max's wounds and settling the dog beside Liam's crib as he always had before, Nathan didn't sleep. He sat nearby in silence, watching these two souls resting head to head, one unable to speak, the other unable to understand human language, yet somehow communicating in a way the world often overlooks, through unwavering loyalty and unconditional love. And in the quiet yellow light falling over Max's fresh wounds, Nathan whispered like a quiet prayer into the night. Thank you for finding your way home. Thank you for never giving up on this family, not even once. The next morning, sunlight slipped gently through the curtains, casting a honey-warm glow across the floor. Max lay close beside Liam, his leg now carefully bandaged, though he still walked with a slight limp. At the dining table, Nathan sat hunched over, his elbows resting on the worn wooden surface. Deep shadows circled his sleepless eyes, but for the first time in days, there was a softness in his gaze, as if Max's return alone had calmed the storm within him. As he jotted down notes for Liam's medication and care schedule, The doorbell rang. It was steady, not rushed or hesitant, like someone who had knocked on many such doors before. Nathan opened the door. Standing there was a woman in her 30s, dressed in a simple office coat, hair neatly tied back, a leather case in one hand, and an ID badge that read, Amanda Reeve, New Jersey Child Welfare Services. She offered a polite smile, though her eyes showed a hint of discomfort as she spoke. I'm a caseworker. We received a report regarding the childcare conditions at this residence. I'd like to take a look inside, if that's all right. Nathan froze for a beat, his heart tightening as he instantly guessed who was behind the complaint. No name needed to be spoken. The tall, prying figure of Linda Cartwright, with her sharp eyes and tapping cane, flashed in his mind like a reflex. He nodded, suppressing a sigh, and stepped aside. Please, go ahead, he said calmly. Amanda entered the modest apartment, observing with the trained eye of someone who understood hardship, yet didn't lack compassion. She made quiet notes. The apartment was clean. Medical supplies met standard. Liam was properly positioned in a wheelchair, and medication was neatly organized. Nothing matched the neglect described in the report, but it wasn't the checklist that made Amanda pause. It was Max. The dog lay silently beside Liam, his head resting gently on the boy's legs, watching each breath with alert, quiet devotion. His ears twitched at the soft hisses of the ventilator, and then, as if to confirm his place in all of this, Max stood, picked up a fallen handkerchief from Liam's lap with his mouth, and placed it back gently. Amanda's pen paused mid-word. Noticing her surprise, Nathan stepped forward, his voice steady and low. I don't know who told you I'm unfit to care for my son, but I know this. Without Max, Liam wouldn't have survived the 2 scariest nights of his life. My boy can't speak or call out, but Max always understands. He reacts before I even realize something's wrong. He wasn't angry. He didn't plead. His words came out simply, like they'd lived inside him for a long time, waiting for someone willing to hear them. Amanda didn't respond right away. She knelt beside Liam, taking in the boy's wide, blinking eyes. Then she turned to Max, reached out carefully, and Max didn't pull away. He tilted his head as if recognizing the sincerity in her gaze. And then, something small, something extraordinary, Liam stirred. His tiny hand reached out, gently touched the soft fur on Max's neck, and turned toward Amanda as if to say, See? He's my friend, and I'm okay. An hour later, Amanda left, but this time she carried a new file, an application for special aid, support for families raising children with disabilities who are aided by service animals. She said little at the door, just looked at Nathan once more and nodded. I'll recommend extra support. Not out of obligation, but because of what you and Max are doing for Liam. It's the kind of miracle no policy should overlook. Nathan smiled silently as she disappeared down the hallway. For the first time, someone from the outside hadn't just seen this apartment as a case file. They saw it for what it truly was. A home filled with effort, love, and something close to magic. And in their familiar corner, Max returned to his usual spot beside Liam, as if he had never left. The door closed softly behind Amanda, leaving only the echo of her steps. And in Nathan's heart, another door, a quieter one, began to open. A door to hope. Hope for a future where love, loyalty, and devoted care aren't just expected, but recognized, supported, and held sacred. Ever since that unexpected visit from Amanda Reeve, the social worker who left not just with sympathy in her eyes, but a doorway to a new support program, Nathan's tiny apartment seemed to come alive with new energy. Mornings no longer began with the dread of bills or job pressure, but with the quiet connection between Liam and Max, the loyal four-legged friend always waiting patiently by the crib, ready to respond the moment Liam stirred, doing anything to help bridge the boy's silent world to the one outside. Then, the impossible started to become real, something no speech therapist dared to promise. Max was teaching Liam how to speak. Nathan couldn't say when it started. Maybe it was those moments when Max sat in front of Liam, tilting his head and letting out a gentle bark. then waiting. Or those quiet afternoons when Max brought Liam a familiar toy, laying it by his hand, and made soft, grumbling sounds as if whispering a secret. The first time Liam moved his lips while Max barked, Nathan thought it was just a fluke. But the third, fourth time, when Liam's eyes lit up at each sound, when his mouth started moving more deliberately, Nathan knew. This was no accident. There was a lesson happening, wordless but powerful, and Max was the most patient teacher in the world. Every day Max took his place in front of Liam, ears perked, gaze soft, and waited. Nathan joined in, setting Liam in a support chair, placing a small mirror before him, and gently steadying his chin. Each time Max made a sound, Nathan whispered, "Your turn, Liam. Say it with Max." At first there were just tiny lip movements, then shallow breaths, faint puffs of air. But within each effort, Nathan saw something new. Intent. Liam was trying, slowly, painfully, to respond, to be heard, to step into a world he'd been locked out of for too long. And then, one morning like any other, sunlight pouring through white curtains and warm wood floors glowing, Max barked softly, just once. Nathan was in the kitchen mixing formula when he heard something different. He turned, walked closer, and froze. Liam was staring at Max. His lips pressed together and then parted. A soft sound escaped. Mup, barely a whisper. Fragile, but real. Max perked up instantly, ears forward, tail wagging gently, as if he had just heard the word he'd been waiting for all along. Liam's eyes fluttered closed, then opened again. "Braver now," he whispered once more. "Ma." The room fell completely silent. Nathan, his hands trembling like the first time he ever held his newborn son, knelt beside Liam and wrapped him in his arms. Tears slid down his face into Liam's fine, soft hair. He didn't need the full word, didn't need daddy. Just that one syllable, "Ma," was enough. Enough to shatter the silence of 3 long years, enough to mark Liam's first true step toward the world. Max stayed close, not quite understanding Nathan's tears, but sensing the shift in the air. He leaned in, pressing his nose into Liam's small hand in quiet celebration. That night, Nathan finally opened a journal he hadn't dared to touch in months, and wrote his first entry. Liam said, "Ma," not because of doctors, not because of medicine, because of Max, because of friendship, because of a miracle. Under the soft glow of an old desk lamp, Max curled up again by the crib, ears flicking gently, gaze steady, as if ready for the next lesson. Ready to keep teaching Liam how to step out of the dark, through love, patience, and a single tender bark. Ever since Liam uttered his first "ma," a tiny syllable, yet loud as a bell awakening a long-slumbering hope, the rhythm inside the third-floor apartment had quietly shifted. Each day was now marked by small but precious moments. Liam's first touch when Max placed a toy in front of him, Nathan's tearful, grateful gaze when his son puckered his lips, trying to form a word, and Max's soft barks, no longer alerts or calls for help, but quiet, wordless lessons guiding the boy back to the voice fate had once stolen from him. The video Nathan captured, a simple, spontaneous clip with sunlight filtering through curtains, Max sitting opposite Liam, Liam saying, "Ma," and Nathan breaking into sobs, was shared online like a beam of warmth piercing through the often bleak noise of social media. Nathan hadn't meant for it to go viral. He'd only wanted to keep a private memory. But within 3 days, it had been shared hundreds of thousands of times. Thousands of messages flooded in, from parents of non-verbal children, those with autism, cerebral palsy, or unexplained silence, reaching out, asking for advice, clinging to the hope that such a miracle might find their child too. Among the sea of messages, one name stopped Nathan cold. Sarah Dawson, a former colleague he'd thought had vanished with the years he left behind. She wasn't just a work friend. She was one of the few who truly understood a part of his story. On the day Nathan resigned to care for Liam full-time, she had left a ginger cookie and a handwritten note on his desk. It said only one line, Every great journey begins with a quiet sacrifice. I believe in you. Now Sarah was back, with a simple message. I saw the video. If you're open to it, I want to help. That afternoon, the sky was overcast, and a soft breeze rustled the leaves outside. Nathan sat across from Liam, helping him practice basic sounds. Max was in his usual role, seated in front, tilting his head, barking gently each time Liam moved his lips correctly. The doorbell rang. Steady. Familiar. When Nathan opened the door, Sarah stood there in a caramel-colored coat, thin black-rimmed glasses, a thick folder in hand. She smiled, her eyes a little misty. You haven't changed much, but your world has. As Sarah stepped into the room, her gaze went straight to Liam and Max. For a heartbeat, the room seemed to pause. Max lifted his head, not defensive, just watching with that intelligent calm of his. Liam looked at her, too, lips pursed, as if trying to decipher who this new person was. Sarah didn't speak right away. She simply knelt to Liam's eye level, smiled warmly, and whispered, "Hi, Liam. I'm an old friend of your dad's. I heard your ma, and I believe it's just the beginning." After a brief catch-up, Sarah opened her folder. Inside was a world Nathan had never touched. A list of nonprofit organizations seeking candidates for therapy dog programs, profiles of speech specialists at New Jersey's rehabilitation centers, medical scholarships for children showing exceptional progress through nonverbal communication, and most importantly, a proposal to introduce Max as a special case study in the neurological link between animals and children with communication challenges. "You know," Sarah said as she flipped to the final page, "what Max is doing for Liam, it's not just instinct. It's a kind of connection that's never been documented in any therapy model. And if we guide it the right way, Max won't just help Liam. He could help shape a new kind of intervention for thousands of other children." Nathan looked at Max, still lying close to Liam, eyes never straying. He turned to his son, whose face was calm, but eyes sparkled with a curious awareness. In that moment, the exhaustion and doubts of countless days seemed to lift. What he once believed was a lonely effort was now clearly leading somewhere larger, where every smile, every syllable, every gentle touch from Liam could become a guiding light for so many others. Sarah didn't promise the journey would be easy, but she made one thing clear. Nathan wouldn't be walking it alone anymore. She offered to handle the legal paperwork, schedule meetings with specialists, and even bring Max to the evaluation sessions herself. "This isn't just for Liam," she said firmly. "It's for every child like him, children who deserve patience, belief, and love expressed in the language they understand." The afternoon faded in quiet motion. As Sarah left, Liam lifted his head to watch her go, his hand reaching for Max reflexively, a small gesture that left Nathan choked with emotion. His son was learning to express himself. And thanks to Max, to Sarah, and to those who still believed miracles lived in simple things, a new chapter in Liam's recovery had begun. Not just a journey for a father and son, but a movement, a shared faith. That night, as the streetlights glowed through the window, Max lay beside Liam again, head resting on the boy's legs like always. Nathan held the folder Sarah had left, his fingers tracing the words, "Animal-assisted therapy." A thought rang clear in his mind, perhaps clearer than ever before. We're not just surviving anymore, we're inspiring. And Max, as if sensing it too, shifted slightly, closed his eyes, and breathed deeply, ready for tomorrow and the next chapter in their quietly extraordinary story. After that hopeful meeting with Sarah Dawson, with therapy center brochures and training programs stacked neatly on the small living room table, Nathan felt the path ahead widening. What once seemed like a solitary road for just the three of them now felt open, lit by belief, community, and doors waiting to be opened with faith. He spent nights reading every page, every policy, every testimonial from families like his. And the more he read, the more one truth became certain. Max was destined for something greater. He wasn't just Liam's dog. He was a living symbol of hope, connection, and healing. But there was one condition Nathan couldn't accept: Max leaving Liam during the training. He knew, more than anyone, that Max's magic wasn't just in what he could do, but in whom he did it for. Their bond wasn't an accessory. It was the source of everything. So Nathan chose a specialized in-home program, allowing Max to stay by Liam's side while undergoing professional training, learning without losing the role he had come to embody so completely. The trainer was Ella Miller, a woman in her 40s with neatly tied gray hair, simple clothes, sharp eyes, and a warm, grounded presence. The moment she stepped into the apartment, she was struck by a scene she'd never encountered in over 15 years of working with therapy animals. A German shepherd curled at the feet of a paralyzed boy. No leash, no commands, just a silent empathy radiating between two souls. When Max looked up at her, without barking, without rushing forward, simply stepping near and gently touching her hand with his nose, Ella whispered under her breath, "My God, those eyes. It's like he's asking if he's done the right thing." The first evaluation was straightforward. Ella asked Max to sit, lie down, stay, walk beside her, all of which he executed flawlessly. But what truly left her speechless wasn't Max's skill. It was his absolute, unwavering focus on Liam. Even when she dropped a loud object, set off an alarm, or created mock emergencies, Max never wavered. Every tiny movement from Liam, a furrowed brow, a tired breath, a drifting glance, triggered an immediate response from Max, like he wasn't just watching but reading Liam through a silent language no one had ever taught him. "I've trained over 200 therapy dogs," Ella said, holding a blank evaluation form she couldn't bring herself to fill. "But I've never seen anything like Max. He doesn't obey commands. He responds by instinct. And that instinct is terrifyingly accurate." Nathan said nothing. He had known this for a long time. From the moment Max sensed Liam's breathing trouble before the alarm sounded, from the way that dog pulled his son back into life with nothing but quiet presence. But now, it wasn't just love that confirmed it. A professional had named it. It was real. It was credible. Ella proposed a 6-month training plan, a mix of home visits and remote tasks. Max would learn to detect changes in Liam's body: skin temperature, rapid breathing, signs of muscle spasms. He'd be trained to fetch critical items, press emergency buttons, and most uniquely, continue stimulating Liam's language through his presence, something almost unheard of in the therapy world. As Ella packed up to leave, she knelt and whispered to Max, "You don't need training to become a therapy dog, Max. You already are one. I'm just here to help the world recognize it." That night, Liam slept more deeply than usual after a long day of exercises. Max lay close, eyes open, watching the quiet as if on guard. Nathan sat at the table, flipping through Ella's guidebook. His eyes lingered on the first line. Not every dog is born to be a therapy companion, but when one knows who they live for, the world will learn to trust them. Nathan looked at Max, and for the first time in many months he spoke. Not a whisper, not a mumble, but a clear voice that echoed gently through the still apartment. "We're going all the way, Max. For Liam, and for every child like him." Max didn't reply. He just closed his eyes, wagged his tail softly, and drifted into sleep. Ready for tomorrow. Ready to continue the journey of a hero without a cape, no longer walking alone. By the 3rd week of Max's advanced training, his progress had far exceeded expectations. With every session, trainer Ella Miller noted that the bond between Max and Liam wasn't just the foundation. It was the very catalyst that made each exercise significantly more effective than any typical standard. Each day in that small apartment felt like a journey of quiet recovery, where even the smallest progress, a well-timed bark, a tentative hand reaching for a toy, became a victory shaped by love and patience. But just as things began to brighten, an unexpected blow struck, not to Liam's health this time, but to the one thread of financial stability Nathan still relied on. That afternoon, after taking Max out for training, Nathan returned to a full inbox. Among the unread messages was one with a stark, chilling subject line. Company liquidation notice, immediate closure. Just one line. And Nathan froze in his seat. His hand trembled, not in anger, but from the familiar numbness of a father once again standing at the edge of the unknown. Months of scraping by, carefully calculating every dollar between hospital bills, therapy, and Max's specialized training collapsed with a single email. That night, Nathan didn't sleep. He sat by Liam's side, watching him breathe steadily. Max lay with his head resting on Liam's pillow, next to the boy's favorite embroidered ball. Nathan's mind churned with questions he didn't want to answer. Should he stop? Should he return Max to the training center and cancel the home program to save money? Should he give up? By morning, drained and desperate, Nathan sat at his desk, half-finished resignation letter to Ella on the screen. Then, behind him, a faint sound broke the silence, a soft, almost inaudible "ma." Not clear, not strong, but determined. Nathan turned. Liam was looking straight into his eyes. There was no panic, no begging, only a fierce resolve Nathan had never seen before. The boy moved his lips again, face flushed from effort, as though he were trying to say something bigger than his limited voice could contain. Max rose instantly and padded over, laying his head on Liam's lap. His deep brown eyes were steady, loyal, and unshakable. In that moment, Nathan felt like both of them were asking him the same unspoken question. Not with words, but with a love that didn't need them. "I don't want to give up. Do you?" Nathan clutched the unsent letter, and the tears came. Uncontrolled, like a child's. He pulled Liam into his arms, then wrapped Max into the hug as well, finally saying aloud what he had kept buried for so long. "I'm scared, Liam, but if you're not giving up, then I can't either." That very evening, Nathan deleted the email to the center. In its place, he wrote a new one, an application to join a financial support platform for parents of children with disabilities. The site allowed families to share their stories publicly as a source of hope and mutual support. Nathan also began recording short videos documenting Max's training journey. Not to go viral, but as a journal for others walking similar paths. He'd lost his job. His bank account was thinning by the day. But Nathan knew he had made the right decision. He had chosen to keep fighting, for his son, for Max, and for the fragile but enduring belief that still lived inside their tiny apartment, that three beings, holding tightly to one another, could weather even life's fiercest storms. Though their financial footing was shaky, Nathan stayed true to his promise. Max's training would continue, and Liam's therapy would not stop. Giving up was no longer an option. The videos Nathan posted on the support platform began to draw attention, not out of pity, but from genuine admiration and empathy. People who once felt alone in their battles with illness or disability now saw in Liam and Max a common thread, a beacon of unconditional love. Life was still hard. However, in Nathan's heart, something stronger than income or credentials was taking root. The belief that what he was doing every day mattered. And just when things began to feel manageable again, another wave crashed in, this time from Liam's own fragile body. That morning, Max didn't hear the usual "ma" greeting when he padded over to Liam's bed. The boy lay motionless, cheeks flushed, breath rapid and shallow. Nathan rushed to him, touched his forehead, and felt it radiating terrifying heat. The pediatrician came quickly. The diagnosis: the severe flu. With Liam's compromised immune system, his body had deteriorated overnight. It wasn't life-threatening with close monitoring, but one sentence from the doctor cut deep. For the next few weeks, he may temporarily lose his ability to speak or respond. His body is diverting all its energy to recover. Nathan sat beside the bed, watching his son, who had fought so hard for that one syllable, who had trembled with focus just to say, "Ma," now lie limp, unable to reach for the toy Max brought. It felt like being yanked back to square one, like everything they'd built had been swept away in a single night. That evening, Nathan collapsed beside Liam's crib, head in his hands, overwhelmed by a sorrow so heavy he wasn't sure he could stand again. But unlike him, Max didn't give up. From the moment he sensed Liam was ill, Max hadn't left the boy's side. He didn't bark. He didn't seek attention. He simply lay there, silently watching over his friend. Every time Liam stirred, Max would gently lick his arm or nudge his hand, as if to whisper, "You're not alone." When Liam refused food, Max placed his favorite toy beside the tray. When the fever spiked and Liam slipped into fevered dreams, Max lay against him, pressing his warmth close, like trying to lend life itself. Nathan watched it all, wordless. He picked up his camera again, not to record progress, but to document perseverance. He filmed Max curled beside Liam, eyes filled with something beyond instinct. In a video journal entry, Nathan wrote, "My son can't speak right now, but Max is speaking for him. By staying." A week passed like a silent battle. Liam weakened but held on. Max never left his post, not even once. When Ella visited during a check-in session, she was visibly moved. Max refused to leave Liam to do his exercises, and Ella didn't insist. She placed a hand on the dog's head and said softly, "He's doing something no program teaches, staying even when the one he loves can't respond." Then, on the 12th morning, after 11 days of fever and silence, Liam opened his eyes. Slowly he turned his head toward Max. His hand lifted, barely, and touched the familiar soft fur. Max shot upright, nudging his head into Liam's palm, tail swaying. Not frantically, just enough to say, "I'm still here." Nathan stood frozen, overcome. Liam still couldn't speak. That tiny voice they had worked so hard for was gone. For now. But the way Liam looked at Max and the way Max never wavered said the only thing Nathan needed to hear. "I'm not giving up, Daddy. And neither is Max." In that dim winter light, where miracles had bloomed before, Nathan took his son's hand, leaned into Max's shoulder and whispered, "We can start over. As long as we're together, I believe the miracle will return." After countless days cloaked in silence and fear, where each shallow breath from Liam was enough to twist Nathan's heart, the small apartment finally began to glow with the first signs of hope. Though Liam was still weary and voiceless, the moment his hand gently touched Max's fur, the way their eyes locked with quiet familiarity, Nathan understood one undeniable truth. His son had not given up. And perhaps it was Max's love, unconditional, limitless, and without expectation, that was slowly stitching an invisible thread between Liam's heart and the will to live. That morning, sunlight slipped through the window, casting a soft golden glow across the room. Max, who had not left his post beside Liam for over 10 days, suddenly stood, walked to the corner where the toy basket sat, and carefully picked out a familiar item. The soft, gray, stuffed elephant. Liam's first toy, the one he had once reached for with his hand. No one told Max to choose it. No one gave a command. But somehow he knew Liam needed something familiar, something to remind him he had come through before. Max gently placed the elephant beside Liam's hand, then lay back down, head resting on the boy's pillow, waiting for something, or maybe nothing at all. From the kitchen, Nathan, still holding a cold cup of tea, turned and froze. He watched as Liam slowly turned his head toward Max, eyes wider, brighter than they'd been in days. 1 second passed, then another, and in the kind of silence that holds its breath, a tiny sound emerged, hoarse, fragile, trembling, but unmistakable in its meaning. "Ma." The cup slipped from Nathan's hand and shattered on the floor. But he didn't care. His knees nearly gave out. That one sound, the very sound that had first made him cry the day Max helped Liam speak, had returned. Despite everything, Liam was still here, still fighting, still wanting to speak. Max lifted his head instantly, ears alert, tail swaying, not wildly, but gently, as if waiting for that single permission to celebrate. He didn't bark, he didn't leap. He simply leaned in, pressed his cheek to Liam's hand, and licked his tiny fingers as if to say, "I knew you were still here." Nathan rushed to the bed, fell to his knees, wrapped Liam in his arms, and pulled Max into a hug. He couldn't form words, just kept repeating in his heart, "Thank you. Thank you for not giving up. Thank you for showing my son the way back." In that moment, every fear, every sleepless night, every memory of fever and helplessness dissolved. The room was no longer a shelter for 3 fractured lives. It had become a true home, a place where trust wasn't just present. It was being proven daily through actions, through eye contact, through the unwavering loyalty of a dog who refused to give up. That day, Nathan turned on the camera again. He didn't speak. He simply filmed Max lying next to Liam and the stuffed elephant resting gently on the boy's chest. In the short caption, he wrote, "We thought we were back at the beginning, but we weren't. We're still moving forward. Slowly, yes, but forward all the same." And once more, in the heart of that father, quiet belief transformed into strength, not delivered by doctors or therapy, but through a devoted dog and a child who had never stopped fighting. After Liam whispered that miraculous "Ma" amid his fever recovery, the little third-floor apartment seemed to take on a new rhythm, not noisy or bustling, but warm, steady, and full of quiet hope. Every morning, Max was still the first name Liam tried to say, and Max remained the one friend whose presence made Liam's eyes light up as soon as he awoke. Nathan, encouraged by signs of his son's recovery, cautiously resumed at-home speech therapy. But this time he wasn't working alone. Max was no longer just an assistant. He was the teacher, no textbook required. Under the guidance of trainer Ella Miller, Nathan introduced a new approach they had hesitated to try before, pairing correct vocal attempts with behavioral rewards. But unlike most children, Liam didn't respond to sweets or toys or flashy sounds. He only responded to interaction from Max, and Ella understood that. So they created a simple, elegant model. Every time Liam attempted a correct sound, whether M, ba, or ka, Max was trained to bring one of Liam's favorite toys, the stuffed elephant, the soft, plush ball, or the red plastic car. At first, progress was slow. It took Liam minutes to focus on a word. Sometimes he turned away or uttered nonsense syllables. But Max never showed disappointment. He stayed beside Liam, watching him with calm devotion. And each time Liam tried again, even if it was a whisper, Max would rise, walk to the toy bin, choose the correct item, and place it gently in Liam's hand. No treats, no prompts, just a beautiful circle of love, sound, persistence, and a friend who responded with care. Then, something extraordinary happened. Something no one expected. Liam started to ask. He stopped waiting for Max to choose randomly. He would glance at the toy he wanted, then look back at Max, lips trembling with effort, trying to form a sound. One day Nathan placed 3 toys before him. Only one was Liam's favorite. The boy stared at the elephant. Lips pursed, and softly said, "Va." Max understood immediately. He went to the elephant, picked it up, and brought it over. And Nathan stood there, frozen in tears, because for the first time, his son had communicated with both intention and language. From that day on, the home bloomed with quiet miracles. Liam learned to speak to be heard, to point to be answered, and to smile to be understood. All because of Max, a dog who couldn't speak words but understood Liam better than anyone ever had. Nathan began documenting the video sessions, not just as a private journal anymore, but as a healing library for other families in need. And the magic? It began to spread. These short clips of a dog who listened and a child who found his voice one syllable at a time traveled far beyond their apartment, touching millions. Local news came asking for interviews. Medical journals requested permission to document the case as part of a study on animal-assisted speech therapy, and messages poured in from families around the world asking Nathan how he had done it. Not with machines, not with money, but with something simpler. The pure, unwavering bond between a wounded child and a dog who never turned away. When asked the secret to it all, Nathan simply smiled and answered, "I didn't teach Max anything. I just let him love my son his way. And the miracle found its way from there." And from that moment on, each time Max brought a toy to Liam, the boy not only reached out, but began to name it. Elephant. Ball. Max. The words weren't clear, they weren't perfect, but within them lived a world awakening from silence and fear. This friendship didn't just change one boy, it was quietly changing the world. After months of relentless dedication, with Max faithfully by his side, as Liam's first syllables slowly formed into small, coherent phrases, and as the videos of his recovery continued to ripple warmly through social media, Nathan knew a new chapter had arrived. Not just home-based therapy anymore, but a step into the wider world. Liam's first day of preschool. And while Nathan's heart was heavy with quiet worry about curious stares, pitying looks, or whether his son could keep up, there was one thing that gave him peace. Max would be going too. That morning, the apartment carried a quiet, ceremonial air. Nathan dressed Liam in a soft, sea blue romper, non-slip shoes, and a small cap to shield him from the sun. As for Max, their loyal German shepherd, Nathan gently strapped on a dark brown therapy vest embroidered with the words, "Max, Certified Therapy Dog." The dog stood tall and proud, like a protector ready for duty. Liam was settled into his custom wheelchair for children with paralysis, and Max instinctively took his place to the left, perfectly within Liam's line of sight, always close enough for a comforting touch. As the wheelchair rolled steadily toward the school entrance, all eyes turned to the trio: a tired but bright-eyed father, a small boy with hesitant but determined eyes, and a strong, steady dog walking like a soldier entering his battlefield. The children paused their games. Some ran over with questions and pointed fingers. Max stopped and waited for Nathan's cue, then gently lay down to avoid startling anyone. When a little girl came near, reaching out to touch him, Max tilted his head, blinked slowly, and wagged his tail, so gently that any doubt melted instantly. Liam's teacher, Miss Rebecca Holden, a young woman with a radiant smile and warm voice, came out to greet them, eyes wide with awe. "So this is Max? He's more famous than my students." Nathan smiled and nodded, while Liam managed a quiet greeting. His usual hello. As if understanding, Max turned and performed 3 flawless commands. Sit, lie down, then spin once before bowing his head. The playground erupted in applause, not just from children, but from parents and teachers alike. They hadn't just seen a dog perform, they had witnessed a bond in motion. The first class wasn't easy. Liam struggled with the rhythm of songs. Group activities involving movement left him sitting quietly, watching. But every time Liam looked around, lost in the energy of the room, Max rested his chin gently on his lap, as if to remind him, "I'm here." During story time, when Miss Rebecca read about elephants in the jungle, Liam turned to Max, eyes bright, and whispered, "Le." The class fell silent. Then came the clapping. Max immediately trotted to the small school bag and pulled out Liam's stuffed elephant, placing it in his lap like a planned miracle. That afternoon, as school ended, the principal came out personally to walk Nathan and Liam out, still visibly moved. "We've never seen anything like this. Your son, he's not just communicating, he's helping the other kids learn empathy. And Max, I never imagined a dog could help a child be seen the way he does." Nathan smiled, bending to stroke Max's head, still walking in his exact position beside the wheelchair, never straying once, and replied softly, "He's not just a dog, he's a friend. And for Liam, that friendship changed everything." The first day of school ended under golden sunset light. The silhouettes of a father, a child, and a dog turning off the main road toward the familiar third-floor apartment. Once a place of anxiety, it had now become the birthplace of something extraordinary. Behind them, the laughter of children echoed like the sincerest welcome for a journey of courage, written by unconditional friendship. In the days that followed Liam's start at preschool with Max by his side, life inside the small third-floor apartment found a new kind of rhythm. Not because all challenges had vanished, but because Max's steady, dependable presence had become an essential part of this new chapter. Liam grew used to hearing his name called by his classmates. He learned to respond, with his eyes, with a whispered Max, or sometimes a softly pronounced elephant or ball. Max, meanwhile, didn't just help Liam communicate. He was the bridge that helped the boy step into a world that had once seemed so closed off, but no one could have predicted what would happen on a gentle autumn afternoon. How, in a single, everyday moment, Max would once again stop the world and officially become a living symbol of love and loyalty. That afternoon, Nathan took Liam and Max to the park near the school, a familiar spot where they often stopped after class. It wasn't a large park, but it had a small man-made pond, a low fence, plenty of shade, and the soft chatter of birds overhead. Nathan parked Liam's wheelchair under a tree. Max, as always, lay beside him, keeping a quiet watch. Nearby, a group of children played close to the pond. Among them was a little girl, no older than 4, wearing a red knit hat and chasing a ball that had rolled near the edge of the water. Her mother, distracted by a phone call on a nearby bench, didn't notice as the girl leaned over the railing. In an instant, her tiny feet slipped on the damp stones. Her body pitched forward toward the cold water. Nathan turned just in time to see Max bolt, like a streak of light. No command, no hesitation, no delay. Max raced to the pond, reached the girl in seconds, and threw himself sideways across her path. His teeth clamped gently onto the back of her coat, pulling her backward with perfect control. She tumbled back to safety, her hands splashing into the water, but her body never fell in. Max stood firm between her and the edge, letting out a low growl, more protective than threatening, as if to warn the danger away. A bystander caught the entire moment on video. The footage went online less than an hour later, and by nightfall it had gone viral. Millions of views. Headlines followed: Therapy Dog Saves Toddler at Park. Hero Dog Max, from disability companion to real-life guardian angel. Within days, national television reached out to Nathan for an interview. But it wasn't just Max's bravery that captivated people. It was the story behind his calm eyes and unshakable loyalty. As viewers discovered the videos of Max helping Liam learn to speak, the narrative shifted. Praise turned into reverence. This wasn't a stunt. This was a friendship, unscripted, real, and needing no words to earn trust. Max became a symbol. Not the fleeting kind for headlines, but something lasting. A symbol of unwavering love, of belief, of a connection science might explain with neural reflex, but the human heart simply calls a miracle. In a nationally televised interview, Nathan looked into the camera, Liam and Max playing quietly behind him with a red ball, and said, voice trembling with emotion, "Max isn't a therapy dog. He's my son's friend. And what he does, it's just love, in its purest form." Maybe that's why this story of Max, Liam, and a father who once almost gave up reached millions. Because it wasn't really about an extraordinary dog. It was about an extraordinary friendship, one that could change a life, and quietly change the world. After that fateful afternoon at the park, where Max saved a young girl and became a national sensation, Nathan thought he had witnessed the greatest miracle Max could ever bring. Social media overflowed with praise, charities sent thank you letters, and even a veterinary university expressed interest in making Max the face of their animal-assisted therapy program. But to Nathan, all the fame and accolades were just a bright, outer glow. The true miracle, he knew, still lived quietly in their small apartment, where his son and Max continued to fight, day after day, to reach the world. That evening, once the buzz of news and messages had faded, their home returned to its usual calm. Nathan prepared a light dinner for Liam, just like any other day. The boy sat in his high chair, his eyes still sparkling from the park visit. Max lay peacefully under the table, his therapy vest removed, looking every bit the loyal companion he'd always been. Outside, a gentle rain tapped softly on the windows, and the whole room seemed to melt into something warm and still, like a silent embrace sent by the universe to three souls who had already overcome so much. Nathan leaned in, lifted a spoon of soup, and brought it to Liam's mouth. The boy took it, swallowed, then, without warning, turned toward Max. There was no prompting, no coaxing. It was pure instinct. And then, in a voice that was small but clear, round, and full of meaning, Liam whispered, "Max, come." The room froze. It was as if the power had been cut. Nathan's hand stopped mid-air. His heart skipped a beat, unsure if he'd truly heard what he thought he had. But Max didn't hesitate. He stood, tail gently wagging, and walked to Liam, nudging his head softly against the boy's knee, as though he'd been waiting his entire life for that call. And then came the second miracle. Liam laughed. Not a quiet smile, not a breathy chuckle, but a full, joyous, belly-deep laugh, released from somewhere long locked away since the stroke that had silenced him. Nathan dropped the spoon, held his head in his hands, and cried. Not out of grief this time, but from a joy so overwhelming it broke through every wall inside him. He crawled to his son, wrapped him and Max into his arms, holding the two beings who had transformed his entire world. In that moment, all the lonely nights, the battles with the medical system, the doubts, the fear, it all faded like fog beneath the morning sun. Because now, he didn't have to imagine what was possible. Liam had spoken. Liam had called. Liam had laughed. Max licked Nathan's hand and looked up with warm brown eyes, as if to say, "We did it." That night, when Nathan put Liam to bed, there were no lullabies or stories. He just sat quietly by the crib, one hand on Max, the other on his son's, his gaze never leaving the peaceful face of the boy who had found his voice again. Outside, the rain still fell softly, but inside, a sun had risen, gentle, glowing, and brighter than anything he had ever known. Liam's first real words weren't just a call. They were the door to a whole new world, one where limitations no longer defined them because love and friendship had already broken through every wall. That night, after Liam had fallen into a peaceful sleep and Max had returned to his usual spot beside the crib, Nathan stepped out onto the small balcony. He brought a warm cup of tea and his old leather journal, the one that had held every part of their journey from the day Max arrived to the first hopeful tears, and now to this quiet, most complete moment yet. The sky was a deep velvet, scattered with stars, and the soft wind brushed through Nathan's hair like a whisper from a calmer world. Sitting down, he began to write. Slow, deliberate strokes, each word sinking deeply into his heart. Max didn't just save my son. He taught me to believe in miracles. Not the kind that descends from the skies, but the real kind. In a waiting gaze, a perfectly timed tail wag, a burst of laughter after years of silence. That friendship, honest, patient, and unwavering, rewrote the fate of our family. He set the pen down and looked toward the bedroom, where the soft amber glow of the nightlight shone. He knew the journey wasn't over. There would still be hard days, still be trials, but for the first time in years, he wasn't afraid, because he wasn't alone. And his son, who once seemed locked in silence, had found his way out, with his own fragile but powerful voice, with the love of a dog who couldn't speak but understood everything. 1 year later, on Liam's 6th birthday, Nathan pulled out the old journal. He brushed off the dust, sat at the little study table in the living room, where Liam was seated, still delicate in form, but with eyes that now sparkled with strength. Next to him, Max had grown older, too. A few silver strands shimmered in his fur, but his eyes were just as sharp, just as loyal. Nathan turned to the last page and placed his hand over the words he had written that rainy night. "Want to try reading this, Liam?" he asked softly. The boy turned to his father, nodded, and then looked down at the page. his lips pressed together in focus. And slowly, shakily but clearly, Liam began to read, pausing between words, but full of emotion. Max didn't just save my son. He taught me to believe in miracles. The room was silent. Then, Max gently wagged his tail, leaned his head against Liam's leg as if to say, "Well done." And Nathan, he couldn't speak. He just hugged his son tightly, as if holding everything he once thought he could never have. No one knows what the future holds. No one can promise it will be easy. But in that moment, when a boy who once couldn't speak read his father's words, and a dog once abandoned became the symbol of unwavering love, every old wound was healed by one thing: faith. And then, like a closing scene that's a beginning, Nathan turned to a new page in the journal. He didn't write an ending, just a new beginning. We are still moving forward, step by step, together. 3 hearts, 1 story, and a love that nothing can break. The story of Liam, Max, and single father Nathan is not just the journey of a family overcoming hardship. It's living proof of something simple but profound: that genuine love, whether from a person or a dog, can create miracles. From a boy who couldn't speak, a dog that was once unwanted, and a father who nearly gave up, they built a story of healing, hope, and inspiration that has touched millions. And you, have you ever witnessed or experienced a special friendship between a human and an animal? Share your story in the comments. We're always here to listen. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so we can keep spreading messages of love. Thank you for staying with us till the very end. See you next time.